Hey guys, it's Kristen. Welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to be doing my August reading wrap up. So let's get right into it. I am actually going to show you the ratings for all the books here because I don't think it's possible for me to talk about a book and not spoil it. Like, it's been taking me a little bit for me to figure out how I wanted to actually do these, because like some people will like specifically say like spoiler free, so I'm like, okay, does everybody just assume that there's spoilers if I don't say spoiler free? But I want to get in the, like, I want to tell you guys the twists and the turns that like made me love the book or like really impacted me in my reading experience, and I can't do that without telling you what the experience was. So I am going to be full of spoilers, but I have the list here with my ratings. That way, if you see a highly rated book that you might be interested in on the list, you can go check it out for yourself, and then after you're done reading it, you can come back and see what I thought about it or what made me think that way. But let me give you the lowdown on how I actually rate books, since this is the first time I'm doing it. So I'm going to rate them on a scale of 1 to 5, and 1 is going to be like I had to drag myself through the mud to finish this book. Like, I've never DNF'd a book before. So, and I'm just too type A of a personality to DNF a book. So even if I absolutely hate the book, I will finish it just to say I finished it. So like if I have to drag myself through it and I hate the book, that's a 1. A 2 is like I didn't have to drag myself through it, but in the end I really didn't like the book. A 3 is going to be like, or like if I didn't have to drag myself through the book and at the end I just felt like I would be better off just having not read this book. Like, this book didn't matter to me at all. Like, I could have lived my life without reading it. And then a 3 is like, didn't like it, didn't hate it, so it is what it is. And like, I would still recommend it to people, but like, it didn't wow me. A 4 is like, I loved the premise of the book, I really enjoyed the storyline. Maybe I had to drag myself a little bit, maybe I didn't, just depending on like the size of the book. And then a 5 is like, I didn't want to put this book down. Like, I wanted to, like, I stayed up late to read this book. And I like getting a full 8 hours of sleep, minimum. So like, if I am giving up my sleep to read this book, like, it's special. And like, I just devoured it, like, put it in my veins. Like, here we are, Die Hard, love the book. So the first book that I'm going to be starting off with is Deborah Harkins' The Book of Life. So this is the 3rd book in the All Souls trilogy. And so the 1st and 2nd books follows Diana, who is a bishop witch. Yes, those bishops from like the Salem, Massachusetts trials. And she is a like historian. She likes to study alchemy, and she doesn't like magic because her parents actually died when she was a kid. So she like swore off magic ever since then. She never wants to use it, and she finds this She finds this book in the library, and it's magical. And she doesn't think anything of it. Like, she just goes through it like a normal book that she's using to study and like create her next presentation on. But it's really important to all the magical creatures in the world. There's witches, vampires, and demons. And demons are not like the demons from hell. They're just people who are very eccentric and like creatively driven. And she doesn't realize how important this book is. And Matthew de Clermont comes in. He's a vampire. He's also another scientist. And like, he's watching over her. He also wants the book for himself. But like, they kind of end up falling in love, which is forbidden. And there is like this council of the supernatural realm that like uphold the law that like you're not supposed to commingle outside your own species. And the only way, and so like the book takes you through like her realizing her powers and realizing what this book is, and her and Matthew falling in love. And at the end of the book, they end up having to go back to the 1500s, I think it is, because they're trying to escape the council. And that's the only way that they can do it. So then the second book is them being in medieval times and Diana truly coming into her powers and meeting Matthew's father and like all of the family ties and like all of his friends from back in the day, and her really realizing like how long Matthew has lived and like what he used to be and all the roles that he's had in his life. And then at the end of that book, they finally come back to present day, which is this one. So in this one, Diana ends up getting pregnant and she's having twins. And so you find out that the Book of Life is made out of creatures, and it tells the history of just all the creatures since the very beginning. And it tells like why they're not, like all the creatures are dying out. And a vampire that Matthew had sired for unfavorable reasons ends up coming back, and he wants to make witch vampire babies, which Diana can do. So he's like trying to get Diana, he's trying to get the children, he's trying to get Matthew. Like it's a whole big hierarchy. And in the end, Diana and Matthew live happily ever after. And I really like this book. I would give this book I'd say I'd give this book a 4.5. And I highly recommend, if you like witchcraft, if you like little love stories, I would recommend picking up the first book and reading the first book and then seeing if you like the series. But I highly recommend. I really enjoyed them. They did drag for me a little bit, but like these books are like, say this one is almost 600 pages, and I think all the other books are around this time too. So like there were moments where like I felt like I had to drag myself through it, but overall really good book, really liked it. So now we're going to be moving into the Land of Stories series. And so the first book is The Wishing Well, and this is by Chris Colfer. And I would rate this one a 4.5. So it's about these twins, Alex and Connor, and their dad just died. And their grandma comes back to visit them, which she doesn't visit very often, but when she does visit, she's always been telling them stories about like the other like fairy tales, and their dad was a great storyteller, and she gives them like the family treasury of stories, and the twins find out that it's glowing and it's actually a portal to the fairy tale world. So like all these people did exist, and their grandmother is Cinderella's fairy godmother and has been coming through the portal for years, and time there ran a lot slower than it did in our world. But once the twins were born, they synced up and they started flowing together. And so Alex and Connor have to get back home, and the only way to get back home is to collect all 7 things they need for the wishing spell. And so they end up meeting all of the fairy tale characters like Red Riding Hood and Cinderella and Snow White, and they have to travel through the realm getting all these things. And along the way they find out that their dad, of course, was from that world too. And it's very sweet, very cute. It's definitely, I would say, written more towards children, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It was a good little fairy tale read. And the second book from that is The Enchantress. And The Enchantress is Snow White's evil stepmother's before mentor. And like she was on the fairy council, and she was like the fairy godmother's apprentice, and she just, everything goes wrong for her, and like her magic is so great that everybody around her like just seemed to snub her because like her magic was so good. They just were like, oh, you're an overachiever. And then if she did something wrong, then she was blamed for doing something wrong. And so she ended up going evil, and the evil queen got rid of her by using a potion, and they thought they killed her, but as it turned out, it just took her a really long time to heal. So she ends up coming back, and Alex and her brother once again go to the fairy tale world, and they end up defeating her. And It's action-packed, fairy tale, pretty standard norm. I'd give this one a 4.5 too. I really like this one, especially because this is when Alex finally starts to believe in herself, and she's actually the one who beats the Enchantress and finds out that, like, she's supposed to be the next fairy godmother. And it's really sad too, because in the end they end up splitting up. Like, her brother goes back to the real world and she stays in the fairy tale world. And then the next book after that is A Grim Warning, which A Grim Warning I would give a 4. I mean, I liked it. I didn't like it as much as the first two, but I still liked the book. In this one, you come to find out that the brothers Grimm were a part of the fairy godmother and the tour of people that would come through, and like they were producing the stories to keep the stories alive for the fairy godmother, so she would have to come over as often. And you find out that Mother Goose got captured by Napoleon's troops in ye olden times, and Napoleon's captain was like, oh, well, we can go to the fairy tale world and we can get all the treasure in there, and like they don't have weapons, we'll just take over the world for Napoleon. And they get trapped in a portal for 300 years based on a spell that Mother Goose put on the map that the Brothers Grimms have to use to lead the troops through the portal to the fairy tale world. And Mother Goose forgets to tell the fairy godmother, oh yeah, hey, by the way, in like 300 years, these people are going to show up to fight us. And so she ends up telling Connor, who gets it to his sister, and it's a big whole ordeal, but they have to try and fight the entire army that's coming through. And you end up finding out, because they break into Pinocchio prison, which is like where all the really bad people go, and there is the masked man, and you find out in the end of the Enchantress that the masked man is you don't find out that he's their father's twin, but like Alex is like, oh my god, this is my dad, how can he be doing all these terrible things? And then you find out in this book that like it's just his evil twin. So that book goes through them fighting off Napoleon's army, and they end up succeeding. However, they can't capture their uncle Lloyd, who is evil, and he ends up going in the next book, Beyond the Kingdoms, which I am also going to give a 4. In this book, the reason why Lloyd is evil is because his brother had all this magic, and like he thought that his mom favored his brother, and you know, typical sibling rivalry. And he just is so miserable that he just wants to ruin everything. Like, he wants to destroy his mom, he wants to destroy his brother, like that's what he wants to use magic for. Before she ends up realizing how evil he is, she makes one last potion for him because he loves reading. And so she makes a potion for him where he can go into any book that he wants. And he wasn't really interested in the potion, and there's a vault of dreams, and the fairy godmother goes to the vault of dreams and realizes that like his dream is to like destroy her. So then she ends up taking away his powers, and by taking away his powers, it made everything 100 times worse, because now like instead of him just kind of biding his time to destroy her, like that is like his main goal, and he turns into this terrible person. And he uses that same potion to go into other books like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland to retrieve all of the villains and bring them back to the fairy tale world to dominate it. And so after that happens, at the end of that book, all of the villains that he's brought and that he thinks is under his control actually end up turning on him and like casting him out. And well, actually they think they've killed him, but he survives because he's a snake. So then in the next book, which is the author's Odyssey, by this point Connor really finds out that he loves writing stories like his dad, and in order to defeat the literary army that their uncle is producing, Connor decides to go into all of his old short stories and get all of the heroes from his stories to fight the villains. So this whole book goes through their journeys of going through and gathering all of Connor's friends to like bring back to the real world. And this one I'm gonna give a 4 too, although I wish, like, I understand why this book and this book are separate, but I just felt like this book was so long and it didn't need to be as long as it needed to be. Like, I get why it is the way that it is, but I just thought that this book was way too long. Because, once again, these books are not small. Like, this one has 438 pages. So, like, I just didn't think that this book needed to be 438 pages, in my opinion. Still a good book, just a little long for me. Took a little bit of time to actually get going places, and then we actually had to get through, like, most of the whole stories for each story. And then you come back and, like... And there's tons of stuff in these books, too, that are, like, little sub-plot points that are I'm not talking about. But they're good. They're good. That one just took a little long. And then the last book in the series is Worlds Collide, and I'm giving this one a 4.5 because this one I thought was much better than the author's Odyssey, just in terms of pace. And, like, at the end of an author's Odyssey, you find out that throughout the books, you find out that the Enchantress only became evil because the witches cursed her. They put a spell on her so that every time she got her heart broken or, like, someone hurt her, it just amplified, like, 10 times. And then she got even angrier and madder and, like, just ended up turning into this terrible, horrible person. And they end up doing the same thing to Alex because Alex is now the most powerful being in the realm because her grandmother has died. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to use Alex to take over our world. So, and then they're going to come back to the fairy tale world and take it over too. But Alex goes to New York, and this book is about all of the fights coming together. Like, the villains are versing Connor's heroes, and you have the witches coming in and, like, trying to take over the children and build an army to fight everybody else's army. And, like, the military gets involved. There's a lot going on in this book. But I think my favorite part of this book is they open it up with Connor being really old, having all these children, having these grandchildren, and he's doing a book signing because he's written so many great books that have made such a big deal to people throughout his life. And in it, someone asks what happened to his sister because they're like, oh, like, you had a twin, your stories are all about twins, like, it's a little weird that, like, there's so many parallels, but, like, where's your sister? Where has she been? And he can't remember. And so he ends up reading his books to try and remember what happened to his sister because he knows that his books are based on the things that happened in these books. And so he goes through, and, like, at first I thought they killed her. And I was like, how could you kill the main character? Especially in, like, a kid's book. How could you kill the main character? Like, what are you doing? But turns out he didn't kill her. He just forgot that she was in the other world because that's where she's been living. And it just goes through the story. Very nice. I really liked it. And then his sister ends up showing up and it's like, hey, it's time to go to the other world now. Like, hang out for a little bit. So, really ended up liking it. I was very excited to be done with that series because it does have 6 books in it. So it's very long. And then I read The Alchemist, and now I'm pretty sure that I've already talked. I know that I talked about The Alchemist in my September TBR because I'm reading the next books in the series for this month, and I'm pretty sure I also talked about them in the video that went up earlier this week, which was my September book haul, and I talk about buying those books. So if you haven't watched either of those videos, I'm giving The Alchemist by Michael Scott a 3. It wasn't bad, wasn't great. I pretty much have already explained the plot points in both those videos, so go check those out if you really want to know the details on what goes on in this book. But it was fine. Didn't blow my socks off. I thought it would be better, but it wasn't bad either. So I'm still reading I still want to see how the series ends, so I'm still finishing the other books in the series. I'm super mad because I thought that I had already bought all the books in the series, and it turns out I'm missing one, which, like, I just don't want to spend more money on the series because, like, I don't know how I feel about it at this point, so, like, I kind of know how I feel about it, so I really don't want to buy one more book, but I'm going to do it anyways, but that's a next month problem. That is not this month's problem. So I read The Guest List by Lucy Foley in August, and this is actually her first book. So this is her first book that she came out with, or maybe not her first book, but this one came out before Paris Apartment, and I read Paris Apartment before I read this one. So I kind of already knew what I was expecting. So in here, you get 5 different perspectives. So you get the bride, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, and the bridesmaid. And I am giving this book a 4.5. And what happens is this influencer, or well, yeah, I guess you'd say she's an influencer. She's like CEO or like editor of like this big fashion magazine, and she wants this very exclusive wedding, and she's having it out on like this very remote island. Like the only way to get to it is by ferry. It's kind of dangerous to take the ferry sometimes. Like the island gets hit with storms, and she takes it because it's super cheap. But like you don't find that out right away. But this is the point of view of like everybody that I just named. You get each chapter is a different person's point of view, and you end up like they come on the night of the reception dinner, and then so you get what happens the reception night dinner, and then you get what happens like in the morning of the wedding, and then what happens during the wedding and at the reception. And this book is crazy. Like, not gonna lie, the first like 200 pages, I was like, all right, this is a good book. It's a fine book. Like, there was some things where I was like, I don't know why we're talking about this so much. I don't know why this matters so much. And then let me tell you, the last 100 pages, it got me. That's why this book got a 4.5 and not a 4, is the last 100 pages are crazy. Like, all of the connections in this book are insane. So, like, very long story long, you end up finding out that, like, the best man, or not the best man, but the best man and the groom, they killed someone in their middle school year because they went to this exclusive private school that had like a crap ton of hazing, and they ended up killing this kid. And you find out that the reason why they ended up killing him, and the best man just thought it was like an accident, but like the groom planned for him to die because the kid had caught him cheating on some exams, and so he killed him because he caught him cheating, which I think is ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Okay, that's a bit much. All right, maybe you shouldn't have cheated if it was that important to you. But needless to say, and then the groom is like this reality survivor type, like Bear Grylls TV show personality. And you end up finding out during the reception that, like, the best man, they got drunk together, and he was like, oh, we should make a TV show off of, like, the hazing game they used to play in high school and, like, middle school and whatnot. And they go together to the screen pitch, audition, that sort of thing. And at first, like, in the first part of the book, before you find out that, like, the groom is just a giant douche, which you can already kind of see that he kind of is a giant douche, but, like, before it is confirmed that he's a giant douche, he tells his best man, he's like, oh, well, like, they just didn't want you, like, I'm really sorry, bud, like, they didn't think you were that great of an actor. And so he ends up being the only person doing the show. And then you find out during the reception that they really wanted, I think its name's Johnny-O. I know it's definitely John, but they might call him Johnny-O. They wanted him, and not, like, I think they were fine having, like, the duo, but they really wanted him because he was more, like, rugged, outdoors. Like, the men don't really prefer Mr. Clean and Perfect like their wives do. So that was crazy. And then you end up finding out that the bride and her best friend, which the +1 is her best friend's like wife, you end up finding out that like they slept together right after his wife gave birth, which I'm sorry, if you like, they were separated, like she was going through postpartum depression, and just because she didn't want to spread her legs for you, you decided to like leave her. And then during that little leaving her bit is when they slept together. Like, you piece of crap. You piece of crap. Like, that's terrible. You don't cheat on the mother of your children or your pregnant wives. Okay? Okay? Don't do it. Don't do it. It's bad. It's bad. And then like the bride's little sister, like months before the wedding, she hooked up with this guy on an app, and like they started seeing each other kind of regularly for a hookup situation, and she took him to like this gallery function for her sister, and she ended up getting way too drunk and like just puking. Like, he had to like get her a cab to go home. And after that, she finds out that she's pregnant, and she tells the dude, and he just like ghosts her, wants nothing to do with her, like nothing. So she ends up getting an abortion, and you find out that that dude that she was pregnant with is the groom. And I was like, that is insane. Like, okay, that's crazy. And then the icing on this cake, Lucy Foley's icing on this cake, is that the wedding planner who like gave the super discounted rate to get this lady here did it because her little brother is the one that the groom murdered. Insane. This book had so many twists and turns. Like, I could not put this book down. Like, I wanted to read it like it was nicotine, and I don't even do anything with nicotine, but highly recommend if you like a mystery thriller. Like, I left out enough details that you don't know, like, you know all the twists and turns now, but like the nitty gritty, ooh, it's good. It's good. I recommend. So next is Aragon, and this book just holds a special place in my heart. So I would give this a 4.5 to a 5. This is just pure nostalgia for me. Like, I remember reading this book in middle school. Like, it just, chef's kiss. If you like fantasy, if you like dragons and magic and a crap ton of fighting, like, this book's for you. This one's for you. I love this book. It's about Aragon. He lives on a farm in like super like medieval times. Like, it's not medieval times, but like it's that kind of like vibe. Excuse me. And he lives on his uncle's farm with his cousin, and he goes to the spine, which is like the spooky people disappear in the spine. So a lot of people don't like to go there, but he goes there to hunt. Nothing's ever happened to him, and he's out on this hunting trip, and he finds this stone. And like, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, he's never seen anything like it before, and he's like, oh, hey, like, this will buy me some meat for my family. And so he brings it back, can't sell it to the butcher because the butcher absolutely hates the spine, won't do anything with it because his wife died in the spine, and just, it ain't for him. So he takes it home, and it turns out to be a dragon. And so, like, 100 years before was a time of the dragon riders where, like, elves and humans and everybody kind of got along together, and they were in peace. And you had the dragon riders who are, like, the best warriors, very super cool. Well, one of the dragon riders wants all of this power to himself and ends up killing a majority of the dragon riders, and he creates a band called the Forsworn, which is like all of the other evil dragon riders, and he ends up ruling this land for 100 years, and like so oppressive, like, it's ridiculous. And so you go through Aragon realizing he's a dragon rider, Braum teaching him how to, like, be a dragon rider as they're escaping from Caraval, because they don't want to, like, hurt the family or any of the people or the villagers living there. And there's these people called the Razarak, which work for Galbatrix, one of the two. They work for him, and they end up killing his uncle and destroying their farm. So, like, he runs away, obviously, so that nobody else gets hurt, and he's on his journey to get to the Varden, which are, like, the rebels trying to fight Galbatrix and, like, just kill him and end his reign. And so you get to go through that journey with him, and I love this book. This book is pure nostalgia for me. I will own that book for the rest of my life, so highly recommend. The second to last book on my list of books I read in August is Last To Vanish by Megan Miranda, and I am giving this one a 4. Also, this is by Christopher Polini, in case you guys were interested. So, The Last To Vanish, I'm giving a 4. I liked it. It definitely did not end up how I thought it would be, and it was almost kind of anticlimactic the way that it ended. So you get in this little mountain town, like 7 people have, like, gone missing over the year in, like, the last 10 years, and you are following the point of view of Abigail, who came to the town after her mom died, and her uncle's wife takes her in, and, like, she works at a hotel there, and while she's living there, 3 people go missing. There's 2 girls and a guy who go missing. Well, the last guy who went missing, his brother shows up at the hotel to, like, figure out what happened to him. Like, he was a reporter, he was trying to figure out what happened to all the other people that went missing, and he goes missing himself. So his brother shows up and is like, what's going on? Where'd my brother go? What do you people know? Yada, 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 yada. And so you end up following the case, and in the end, you find out that Abby's father is part of the original 4 people that went missing all those years ago. And the reason why they went missing is because the person who's her aunt took the 4 of them out on the, like, mountain trail, because they would do it they were a group of guys who were in a fraternity in college, and, like, every year after, like, they went on a camping trip together, and they kind of quit going on the camping trip because one of their friends who would always plan it, like, got super hooked on drugs, just was not right. So they decided to plan that camping trip as, like, an intervention for him. And you end up finding out that, like, she took him out on the trail, and the guy that was on drugs ended up shooting everybody and almost killed her, but she shot him. And then the sheriff's son at the time, who's now the sheriff of the town, and her husband are the ones who ended up covering up the murders. And, like, it was really a tragedy. Like, honey, if you would have just told them what happened in the first place, like, it's not like you were gonna be the one to, like, get thrown in jail. But anyways, so it's been a huge cover-up for, like, the last, like, however many years. And then you find out that the girl who went missing after them, like, she was on a camping trip with all of her friends from college. They were doing, like, photography and whatnot and hiking, and she went missing. And then the person who came after her who went missing was a person who taught her a photography class. And so she ends up also dying, and it's because the original girl who went missing, her boyfriend ended up killing her on that trip. And I can't remember why he ended up killing her, but ended up killing her on that trip, and then killed the photographer that came looking for her on that trip, and then ended up killing the reporter who came looking into all the business. and he's like a local to the town that like he went away on for college. Like nobody's had seen him since then, and then he randomly came back and like set up like a little internet business, and he is the one who works and does all the electricity and all the phones for the hotel. So all the weird stuff that's been going on at the hotel is because of him. Anywho, they end up capturing him. So like it was kind of anticlimactic in the end, but still very good read. I would recommend if you like thriller, murder mysteries. It was still a good book in the end. So, all right, last but not least is The Perfect Marriage. And this I would probably give another 4 to. And just because like like this one too, like I just thought that it took a long time to really get into the action. Like, and I know like I feel like when it comes to like fantasy books, like they're so big that like the first like 200 pages is like the backstory getting into the world, and then the next 200 pages is like action packed. Like here you go. And like so about halfway through the book of like fantasies is like when you start getting the action, you start getting all the turmoil, whereas like these books that are only 300 pages, the first like 200 pages are needed to like get into all the backstory, and the last 100 pages is where they really get you, which this one, it's not until the last 10 pages. That is the only reason why this isn't getting a 4.5, is because I had to read so many pages to get to the last 10 pages and be like, oh my god. So, this is about Sarah Morgan. She's a very successful lawyer in, I think it's New York City? No, Washington, D.C. She's a really good lawyer in Washington, D.C., like the best of the best. And her husband has been having an affair at their lake house, and his mistress ends up dead in their bed. And so she defends him in this case. And the biggest thing, like I remember reading this and I was like, are you kidding me? Because within like the first like 2 chapters, you realize that like he's cheating on his wife with this other girl that he met who lives in a little town where their lake house is, and she's cheating on her husband with him because I'm pretty sure it's like they do the deed, they're sitting in bed, and like his wife texts him and is like, oh, like, how you doing, how's the lake house, blah 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 blah, and he's like, oh, well, answer my phone, and she's like, blah 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 blah, and she's like, oh, well, are you ever gonna tell your wife about us? And I was like, oh my god. And then he was like, no, are you ever gonna, or I don't think he says no, but he's like, well, are you ever gonna tell your husband about us? And I was like, you both are cheating on your significant others with each other? What are you doing? What are you doing? Why? And then you end up finding out that like her husband is like abusive, which like is no reason to cheat on your significant other. And you end up finding out that he's a police officer. So like I kind of get why she did it, because like she couldn't really leave because like he's abusive, might have killed her, works in the police office, like she's not gonna get any justice. But like this was not the way to go about it. And so you go through all of that turmoil, and I thought that I was gonna get a lot more of like I thought that like we'd get the backstory, they would go to trial, we would get the whole trial experience, and then like you'd find out in the end like if he's guilty or not. And that is not the way this book goes. Like it goes through the experience of like collecting evidence, and like this man is just dumb. Like, I mean, he's kind of smart in the end, because like she's doing her investigative stuff to get the evidence, see where the case is going, but he doesn't trust her to like treat him well because, you know, he's been cheating on her. So he does his own little investigation, which like goes absolutely sideways every turn of the book. And so it's insane. And needless to say, you go through both of their investigations, everything that happens, how dumb this man is, and then you go to trial and you don't even find out what happens at the trial. Like, he just ends up being guilty. And within the last 10 pages, it flashes forward to, like, I think it's 10 years in the future, like, his date, because he was convicted guilty, and he was like sentenced to death row. So it's like 10 years in the future, and he is like she comes to visit him one last time because she stopped coming to visit him because he was like, we gotta get my case appealed, like, I'm innocent. And she's like, dude, it's done, and like she didn't want to deal with it anymore, which is like understandable. Like, I wouldn't mind dealing with my crazy husband that cheated on me and then murdered the person he was with. So she like comes, sees him one last time, and like it's really weird the way she's acting. Like, she's counting down the minutes until like he dies. Like, she's very much there just to tolerate him. And then you end up finding out after he dies, she's the one who planned it all with the person that she hates in the office. They were having their own affair, and they're like, oh, two birds, one stone. And they framed him for the mistress's murder for like there's a whole reason why they framed the mistress. Read the book if you want to know why. I won't give you all the details, just most of them. And I had to wait until the last 10 pages to figure out that it was the wife who did it with the dude she hated. So I was mad that I had to wait until the last 10 pages to read that. But it's a good book. Highly recommend it. This is by Geneva Rose. So recommend this book, Perfect Marriage. It's very good. And that is my last book. This has been a long video. I did not realize that I read 12 books in the month of August until I pulled them all out from my bookshelf. And I was like, holy crap, I read a ton of books this month. So that was my reading wrap up for August. Let me know, have you guys read these books? Do you agree with my ratings? Do you not agree with my ratings? I'm thinking about doing an extra video next month where I suggest my favorite scary movies and my must-watch Halloween movies. So let me know if you guys are interested in me posting that. I will probably put it up anyways just because I want to, but if that's something you guys are interested in, let me know and I will be more prominent about doing it. But thank you guys so much for your time and listening to me talk about these books and spoil them for you, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!